How wonderful was that? How fun. I am one with the one. I am one with eternity. Those aren't just words, by the way. That is the truth that we can live, that we do live, and that we move forward to become more and more aware of. It's our true nature. What happens though, maybe you're not feeling that way, is that our minds are very busy and they distract us and get in the way. But that's okay. That can be surmounted, and we surmount it. The title of my message today is The Universal Christ. That is one way of conceiving of the one presence and the one power. The divine presence that underpins everything. The one that we are one with. The universal Christ. It's the divine presence of God that permeates all of creation, uniting everything and everyone in sacred wholeness. You know, the unity movement's roots are in Christian mysticism, so this is very central for us. In Christian mysticism, it's known as the Christ. You will hear us say that often. Or just Christ. You might hear it that way as well. But more broadly, it is the one power and the one presence that underpins all of reality. It transcends religious boundaries. I think this is important. It is present not only in Christianity, but in Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism, among many others, Baha'i, Sikhism, Native American spirituality, nature-centered traditions. The list goes on. It's been my experience that once you see it in one place, you see it everywhere. And that's the beauty of it, and the power of the awareness of the divine presence. In all of these, we find the common threads of unity and interconnectedness, the sacredness of creation, and the embodiment of love and compassion in all of those traditions that I mentioned. It's the eternal cosmic force of love and life present in all things, a unifying force that holds all things together. I want to share this verse from Colossians that I believe points at this concept. We read about the universal Christ in this verse, the universal Christ as embodied in Jesus, which I'm going to talk about a little later. We see it embodied in Jesus as the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, it reads, in which all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, in which all things hold together. It is, in a sense, this invisible glue that binds everything together, without which there would be nothing, and with which there is everything. Now, I am inspired by Richard Rohr's book, The Universal Christ, the one that we're starting the book study on Wednesday on Zoom. By the way, that link is in the newsletter that went out, and will be in the newsletter. It'll be the same link each week. And Richard Rohr holds forth this idea of what I think of as a threefold incarnation of the Christ in the world, of the universal Christ, of the divine presence. Those phrases can be interchanged, I believe. The first one he teaches is creation itself, as represented in Genesis, the first incarnation of the divine presence. And I'm going to read Genesis 1, just the first few verses. See if you see the divine presence coming into creation. If you think about it that way, it's right there. It reads, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a mighty wind swept over the face of the waters. And then God said, let there be light, and there was light. The first incarnation of the divine presence, seen as creation itself. Every tree, every star, and every atom reflects the divine. Nature, by the way, is not just a backdrop to our lives. It's a revelation of the divine. Some of us are naturally drawn to nature. I have a good friend that's a minister at the Unity Church in Monterey, California, and she said she can just feel it when it's time for her to go sit by herself with the redwoods, which are not far from where she lives. We can all find the divine presence, an experience of the divine presence in nature. In fact, that's one of the primary ways that we can. So if you're wondering in your life, how can I have a deeper experience of the divine presence in addition to your meditation practice, prayer practice, and then continually remembering to look for it, you might try sitting in nature. Some people find it going fishing. I've heard a minister say, I would rather you went fishing and thought about God than come to church and think about fishing. There's a psalm that reads, the heavens declare the glory of God. We can find the divine presence not just in sacred spaces, and this is particularly important to Richard Rohr, but the ordinary and the everyday. Everywhere, not just the sacred, but everywhere. If it's true that God is everywhere always, then we should be able to experience God everywhere always. And if we're not, it's not because God's not there, it's because we're not there. So he invites us to remember it's not just in the sacred, but in the everyday, the plain things, the mundane, God is present. The second incarnation of the divine presence, or of the Christ, Father Rohr teaches, is in Jesus, the human incarnation. Jesus of Nazareth is the concrete historical figure who revealed what it means to live fully in tune with divine reality. We know that here in Unity, we see Jesus as our way shower, right? I am the way is a quote from Jesus, as if to say, if you want to see as I see, you got to do what I do. That's how I take that to hear. It's very clear to me that Jesus saw God in everything and everyone, everywhere, all the time. And what a radical worldview to hold. And imagine for a moment that that is your view, because that is who you are as well. And we might not have gotten to the point yet in our lives where we're seeing God in everything and everyone, always, everywhere. But think about, if you were going to try to communicate that with others, this experience of pure joy, this knowing of God, not just knowing about God, but knowing God moment to moment. How on earth would you go about doing that? It's a very challenging thing to do. You would do it through story. You would do it through parable. You would do it through action. You would model it, not just talk about it, but model it. And if you read the Gospels with that in mind, I suspect you will see it everywhere. Everywhere. Because once you see this, you can't unsee it. You cannot unsee the divine presence once you have seen it and experienced it. It is everything. So it's through Jesus' example, our way shower, that we see how to embody love, compassion, and forgiveness. How to live it, right? Not just talk about it. It's cool to have bumper stickers too, but we want to live these principles in our moment-to-moment life. Not an easy thing to do, but we are doing it. I had a minister that would sometimes refer to Jesus as the master teacher, and I absolutely love that. I've heard Jesus referred to as an ascended master. Right? There are some for whom it is helpful to think about some humans who have been on this earth as ascended masters that we can learn to find our way to the divine presence with. The third incarnation of the Christ is in you and in me. Every person is made in the image and likeness of God, we read. I want to share with you that Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore's favorite Bible verse. Do you know what it is? I'll share it with you. It's Colossians 1:27. It reads, "To them God chose to make known how great among the Gentiles are the riches of the glory of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory." Right? In this incarnation, the divine presence is revealed in us, as it was in Jesus. Now, Mr. Fillmore writes about this incarnation. He wrote that it is the manifestation of the Christ Spirit in individual consciousness, right, in each of us. It is not to be looked for in any external appearance, but in the inner unfoldment of the soul. So while it is true that God is everywhere always, we experience God right here and right now within us. I like to say God may be everywhere always, but I'm not everywhere always. I'm right here right now. So the place where we overlap, that's where it's easiest for me to find the Spirit. And once you find it within yourself, you can see it in nature. Once you see it in nature, if you're open to it, you can begin to find it in yourself. Think of Jesus' words. This is from Matthew 25. Whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. Now, how is that true? If we're not all one and connected, if we're not all the divine presence underneath it. I think it was Ram Dass that said, we're all God in drag, walking each other home. We all are the divine presence manifest. Our task is to realize it and live from that place. I might ask, when we look at someone, especially the marginalized, or the, quote, enemy, right? Do we see the Christ in them? As I like to do as much as possible, I want to offer some practical applications of these principles. Ideas are nice, but ideas are not the divine presence. Ideas function to bring us to practices that can bring us to an experience of the divine presence. The universal Christ invites us to shift from an exclusive view of faith to an inclusive one. If the divine is present in all things and in every encounter, every person and every part of creation becomes an opportunity to experience divine love everywhere. So how do we live out this vision of the universal Christ, of the divine presence inherent in all things? One thing we can do is practice awareness. You suggest start your day by asking, where will I see the divine today? Where will I see the divine today? I predict that if you ask yourself that first thing in the morning, guess what's going to happen? You will see the divine today. Look for it in people, right? In nature, in moments of grace. Have you ever had an experience where all of a sudden it feels like the world just falls away for a moment? Things become timeless for a moment. Your thoughts seemingly just cease for a moment. And you realize the presence of God in you. That's called a unitive. If you went to a university, that's called a unitive experience. It is the experience of oneness with God. And then the world often just comes crashing back in, right? But don't forget that experience. That's who you are underneath it all. That is always available to us. It's always available to me if I'm willing to show up for it. Another suggested, engage creation. Spend time in nature, not just to enjoy it, but to connect with God. He suggests seeing nature as the divine whispering to your soul. Right? It's the divine calling my friend into the redwoods in California to experience the divine presence in that particular way. We know that God is everywhere always, but it can be easier for us humans to make that connection, and it's not quite so busy. It might be easier in the redwoods than downtown Manhattan, right, during rush hour. But God is co-equal in downtown Manhattan during rush hour, as in the redwoods. I heard a teacher say, if you want a small enlightenment, go to the mountaintop. If you want a big enlightenment, go to the city. And if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. It's a lot easier to be enlightened on a mountaintop. It's all a lot easier to be enlightened when we are alone. But that's not where our work is. Right? Our work is out in the world amongst everyone. Serve others is the next suggestion. Treat every person as if they are the Christ in disguise, right, as Ram Dass suggested. Especially, and here's the fun part, here's the part that's so annoying, you know it's true, especially in those who challenge you. Right? Wouldn't it be nice if I could just see the divine in everyone that agrees with me? Because then what we have in common is everyone knows that I'm right. Wouldn't that be great? But I suggest that if your plan for world peace is step one, be right, step two, convince everyone else that you're right, and once they agree with you, then everything's all set. Now, that's not how this works. I invite you to set all that aside and look for the Christ in each person, especially those who challenge us. It's been said that those who challenge us are our greatest teachers. And again, you know that's true. Why? Because it's really annoying. It's really annoying. This is not easy work. The sacred work is not easy. Yes, there are times like those unitive experiences where everything feels like it's fallen into place and all is well. And we know what it feels like to be one with the one. And then guess what happens next? Right? Your 40 days in the wilderness happens next. Immediately, usually. So don't feel like something's gone wrong. Don't feel like I had it and then I lost it. No, you had an experience, and then comes your curriculum. Right? You want to find your way back to that place, do it through that which challenges you. The next one is one that you know I love. It is titled Learn to Give. Right? Learn to give. We do this in many ways. But I like to teach it in the most challenging way. And you know what that might be? It's related to money. Why are we always teaching giving related to money? Can't we go on and on about how I give my time? Yes, that's a wonderful thing to do. Can we not focus on how I give my talents? Yes, of course, that's a wonderful thing to do. What's the one that you don't want to talk about? Why don't we want to talk about it? That's why we do talk about it. It is an extraordinarily challenging practice to take up, and it is equally powerful in its ability to free us. To free us from fear of lack is the bottom line. My definition of tithing is I give 10% of every dollar that comes into my life. I give 10% back to that which has inspired me, where I have been fed spiritually, to the person, place, or institution that has fed me spiritually. That's a very broad definition, right? That doesn't mean your church. You don't have to give 10% of your money to your church, but I would say you do have to learn to give. And if you think, as I did many, many, many times, even after I got into the unity movement, I can be somewhat skeptical person, looking at those teachers, saying to me what I just said to you, and going, This is just a very crafty way to try to trick me into giving my money to this place, or to you, or whatever it is. And the way I got out of that trap, and by the way, that was not true. I just thought it was because I was afraid. The way out of that trap, go ahead and give, but don't give to that person or that place. Do it somewhere else where you've been inspired spiritually, where you've received spiritual food, if you will. And if you're resistant to that, guess what? Your main excuse, this person's trying to trick me. You just took that out of the mix and you still don't want to do it? What's next? And I predict that if you dig and dig, because this is what happened to me, and this is why this is such a powerful practice, if you dig within yourself for why am I so reluctant to take up this practice, that these people who are supposed to know what they're talking about seem to really think this is a good idea. Why am I so reluctant? Because I am afraid there's not enough. Would you love to live your life knowing that there is enough? undertake this practice. That's how you will get there. Not to say it's going to be easy. It might be bumpy, might be scary, might be painful and difficult. If you're feeling tentative about it, just do it for 6 weeks. Do it for 6 weeks and see what happens. And what happened for me was it was so liberating and so freeing, because I cannot give 10% of the money that comes into me. 10% sounds like if there's a sale at a store and it's 10% off, I'm like, that's like nothing, right? Start giving 10% of your income. Does it feel like nothing? No, it feels like a lot of money. It feels like a lot of money. But when you do it, notice how it feels to give, because it is the same joy that we experience as we receive. I've shared before, I used to carry a lot of cash. I don't carry a lot of cash anymore. Just telling you. Like a ridiculous amount. If you want to carry a ridiculous amount of cash, go figure how much money do you make in a year. Put 1% of that in cash in your wallet, whatever that is. You think 1% is not a lot? Put that much cash in your wallet. It feels like a lot. And that cash is there for whatever I'm inspired to do in that moment. Walking down the street, see a pair of shoes in the window. This happened to me. They were ostrich skin cowboy boots. I still own them. I was like, ooh, I like those boots. Mr. Fillmore would say, that is the Spirit calling you forward. There's something here for you, and it's not the boots. It's not the boots, but you're not going to find out what it is unless you act on this. Man, I like those boots. Oh, I see the price tag. Oh, man. I don't have that kind of money for shoes. No, dude, you literally have that in your pocket right now. You have no excuse anymore. Jump off that cliff, right? A net will appear or will grow wings. Jump off that cliff. Get those boots as I did. And what I realized was, this feels wonderful and I'm not afraid. But because I did this, there's not enough. There's not enough in the world. And again, if you don't believe me, don't give it here, give it somewhere else, but do it. Give it. Take up this practice if you want this level of freedom. I cannot give 10% of my income and at the same time maintain a fear that there's not enough. Those things will not coexist. Can't do it. My head would explode, or I would stop tithing, which I have done. But just begin again. One, I had a teacher tell me, and I like this, if you stop tithing and then you realize, oh man, I want to get back to that, you don't have to back tithe. It's not the IRS. Right? You just begin again right where you are. Just like our meditation. Oh man, I was watching my breath, and then my mind went to Europe, and then went to Indonesia, and then I realized, oh man, I'm not watching my breath. I bring my breath back. You don't have to pay penance. You just begin again right now. That's it. You don't owe anyone anything. You just begin the practice again. It is the practice that will teach you this, just like our meditation. So I invite you to that. And if you don't like the sound of it, I double invite you to it. And if you think, as I did, that I just have a fancy way of trying to trick you out of giving your money to the church, don't give it to the church. Give it somewhere else, but give it. Right? Stay in integrity. Think, where have I been fed? Where have I been fed spiritually? So money comes in. Maybe you get paid twice a week, maybe twice a month, not twice a week, every other week or once, whatever when that money comes in, whatever it might be. You might be retired, but you have some income from investments. When that income hits, ask yourself, where does this gift belong? Do it first. Right? Some ask, well, do I tithe on gross or on net? Meaning before taxes or after taxes? My answer is, who are you putting first in your life? The IRS or the Spirit? That's your answer. You put the Spirit first. You tithe on gross. Wouldn't it be great if I could just tithe on that? I would love that. That's not how it works. Right? You tithe on gross. And I invite you to do so and just feel what that feels like. And it will be scary. I remember the first time I ever wrote a tithe check, It happened to be the Edwene Gaines, because I was at a weekend workshop. I've been listening to her book, and sometimes going, yes, and sometimes going, I don't think so. But I was inspired to give, and I wrote a check for 10% of the money that had come in through that pay cycle or whatever it was, and I felt like I was losing my mind. I was like, I'm glad no one's seeing me do this, because this seems nuts. This seems like not a wise thing to do. And I did feel like I was losing my mind, right? But then I realized I had a mind that could use some losing. Because it was my mind that was blocking me. It was my mind in which the fear lived. Right? And the Spirit is the antidote to all of that. So that's tithing. There's only one more. Embrace mystery. I think this is really important. One of the, there are several what I call ego traps, or our mind's greatest hits, where we can get stuck on those ideas. And one of them is that I have to know what's going on. Everything has to be defined. It has to make sense. Has to tie into other things. The advice here is embrace mystery. Let some things be unknown to you. Things of the Spirit. Accept that the divine is bigger than our capacity to understand. And the best that we can do is use our words and stories as signposts to point the way. Right? That's all they are. Parables, stories, principles even, unity principles, whatever they may be. Things that we read in the scripture, they're signposts. And they're pointing us toward the divine. And our role is to walk that direction. Right? I do, as you may have noticed, love the Bible. And I think it's a very important part of my spiritual growth path. But as a teacher said to me once, at some point you have to set down the menu and enjoy the meal. Right? When I read the scripture, I get signposts that show me which way to walk. Then I need to walk. I need to take action. This is a program of practices, not ideas that we can feel right about. Right? Let the ideas show you the way, but then set them down and walk that way. The divine is bigger than our understanding, and it's more expansive than any of our traditions. So one of our other favorite things to do is get exclusive. Right? There's some 30,000 variations of Christianity in the world, some bigger, some smaller. And guess which one they think is right? Exactly. Let's let us all find our way together, whatever that may look like for you. I'm going to close with this quote from Richard Rohr from this book. Christ is everywhere, he writes. And he's using the gender traditional Christian language here. So where he says Christ, you can say divine nature. Where he says him, you can say it. But I want to quote him as written. Christ is everywhere. In him, every creature and every part of creation is anointed with the presence of God. Anointed with the presence of God. That is true. Here's our affirmation for today. On the screen. Yay. I am one with the infinite presence of the universal Christ, expressing divine love, wisdom, and wholeness in every moment. Let's say that together. I am one with the infinite presence of the universal Christ, expressing divine love, wisdom, and wholeness in every moment. Take a breath of that, because we're going to move now into a time of meditation. We're going to set down the menu and enjoy the meal. Right? So I invite you to set aside anything and everything that I have said. If it is hindering you in any way,